Okay, good evening, colleagues. Welcome to the 52nd edition of the Tourism Online Forum series in July 2025. And tonight we are delighted to have you join us for this lecture, which is hosted by the Center for Advanced Tourism Research, CATS, at Hokkaido University. And this is your host, Mo. For tonight, it's an honor to have Dr. Axel Eriksson to share his recent research. The title is about Nature Always Recovers, participants' perceptions of the physical impact on nature from nature-based events. Uh, so Axel Eriksson, we can also call him Axel Sensei. Axel Sensei holds a PhD in tourism from Middle Sweden University, and his dissertation took a qualitative approach to map four actors and understand how they accepted the physical impact on nature, such as trail erosion, from nature-based events. He is currently a GSPS fellow at our university and focus on digital nomad research in Japan. So please note that this online lecture will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel of CATS. So now let's invite Axel Sensei to share his lecture, and please leave your comment and question below in the Q&A box or raise up your hand. We can have a live conversation later. So we also offer subtitle generation. So please click on the subtitle function if you need it. So Axel, I need just 1 minute. Can you change your captions into English? So some of our audience may feel that's useful. The show caption button, the CC with a circle. If you can set your language in English, then the floor is yours.
Yes. So thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Hi, thank you so much to having me here. As Mo just said, my name is Axel Eriksson, and I came here to Japan and to Hokkaido University in March, and I'm going to be here for 5 months doing research on digital nomad. But I am here to do a completely different thing, presenting a part of my study here, which is part of my PhD. The title of here is Nature Always Recovered. So this is a little bit of how the participants which I encountered, how they perceived nature when I was there. And there's a little bit of a remark from what they said. And we're gonna have, so just to say, first of myself and who am I graduated 5th of December 2025 at Mid-Sweden University. It's in a research institute called eTour. I'm coming back to that. I have a background in tourism and tourism global development. That's well my education. But before that, I also have been working as a guide, a professional guide in experience, freelance in Portugal. So I lived 10 years in Portugal. So that's my profession from very start and how I came into tourism. And as I said, I'm doing digital nomad now, so something completely different. I'm also very interested in foreigners living a long time in another country with tourism experience, such as digital nomads. If you have any questions from that, we can talk about that later or another time. So this research project, I also going to say, is part of eTour, eTour Research Center, which is Sweden's leading tourism research institute, which is held at Mid-Sweden University. And this research project was, which this study has been conducted with, is Mistra Sports and Outdoor. It's a big project for around 50 researchers, interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary, where the aim was to make more sustainable land and water usage in sport and outdoor activities. And I was with this project into two themes, as we call it, sustainable land and water usage and sustainable events. So that's how this research, and which I'm going to talk about, springs. This is a little bit of spoiler, a spoiler ahead, what we're going to see here in the future. And we're going to talk a lot about impacts and a lot about nature. We have many things here we cannot have today speak about. For example, what is nature? But exactly what it contains and so on is a very long debate. We just have to go live with it. We can just say that nature is something real and something that exists. We just have to go along with that. And there is also many things we can also talk about in sports ecology and so on, which I have a lot of remarks many times that I don't go into that much. I'm leaving also that aside. We can also talk about sport and serious leisure and so on, but also we're leaving that aside for this time at least. Otherwise, it's we have here 5 parts, and I'm going to talk about the background, the normal classical way, a background, and how we're going to look for what we're going to look for, and the theoretical framework where we're going to see more about what is events and how that goes into a case study and method, the overview of the study, so we can understand in which context this has been, this particular research has been studied within. And then lastly, we take the specific study, which I'm going to present here, and I'm going to put most detailed attention to. So here we have the landscape of Jämtland. We're going to come into that. And first of all, then we're going to look for where is the environmental impact and where is the contribution to it. And it's not very straightforward when we are talking about it in a straightforward way, because we can talk about very little things, and I'm going to come into this. So the terms of impact, and here I'm going to be very pretentious. Actually, I'm going to go into the Epic of Gilgamesh. So the Epic of Gilgamesh is the earliest written record that we have, and it's a fascinating story that so we don't have all the kind of clues exactly what this Epic of Gilgamesh exactly entails, but there is one segment which is highly detailed, which has been suggested. We can see here that this passage is that when the Gilgamesh, the big hero from this epic, they try to destroy a big monster, and by doing that at the same time, they also destroy the natural cedar tree forest. And then they are actually worried of what the god is going to say when we actually destroy nature. So already 8,000 years ago, we already at that time begin to speak about and know that if we destroy something from nature, if we destroy something that we have hold so valuable in our life, we don't really know what the consequences will be. And it's already then 8,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, there was this consciousness of when we are changing nature, what will actually happen, and how will we deal with that kind of problems. If going into our modern time, I think this is one of the most influential quotes that have existed in our modern history. And this is the General Secretary from the United Nations, who said, and I need to quote here, "We know what is happening to our planet. We know what we need to do, and we even know how to do it. But sadly, the ambition of our actions is nowhere near where it needs to be." And I think this is a very, very important thing. We all have the knowledge. We all have all the capacity. We doing all this kind of research all the time, and it seems that we always adding new knowledge into that, but we seems to not be able to really amend our lives into it. And that is really a strong thing. So I think in many of us who are doing environmental, talking about the social environmental research, we have to really think about what is it that actually makes us not doing this, what makes us continue to impact our planet. Of course, Antonio Guterres, he really meant climate change in this context. And this is, of course, not new. It's a wonderful book from Norgard, which is an American Norwegian author that was in the early 2000s in an unnamed village in Norway, who did this ethnography, and she really pinpointed into that kind of sense that people knew that that nature was changing, and the environment changed all the time around them, but they really didn't do anything about it. And they, as she called in her book, living in denial, people really did a lot of effort to deny the impact that we're doing with the environment. And I think everyone today can really see themselves doing that. We're going with the car everywhere. We are taking flights. We are buying a lot of things and so on. But we are aware of it, but we don't change. We have the knowledge, but we don't change. Of course, this happens also in tourism. We're using in tourism a lot of resources all the time. Tourism is a heavily resource uses resources very heavily, and we're doing a lot of impact. That's part of the travel, that we are one time for a few times we are actually traveling, we can actually do more impact than others, and there's tons of research in that. And what I think is the most interesting part in this, it's in events. And we're going to come into this, and there's a ton of research seeing that how we in event we are doing this very intense moment. The local population, they like the events, even though they make some sort of impact, social, cultural, physical buildings and environment and so on. We have spectators also don't really care, attendance, everyone seems to. What makes us then accepting all this kind of impact all the time? But I really do think that to look at that, I think we have a little bit of a wrong perspective when we're looking at this global environment. Of course, if we're talking, comes with a concept of the Anthropocene, which is Kurtzen, I'm not super sure exactly how it's pronounced, I never said it aloud to many people, but is this person who, he didn't invent it, but he really strongly coined for the rest of the world this term, the Anthropocene. Anthropo, which means human, scene, which means epoch. So the epoch of humanity, that human is the one who changing the planet. And when we are, this is from geology, so when we're going to look at when future human or alien or whatever are going to look at the Earth planets, they're going to see a thin layer that says, okay, this was climate change. And this has been used in many ways. So we're talking about this global catastrophe. There is a daunting task that lies ahead for scientists engaged to understand these kind of things. That is said in 2002. And it's another book here which I strongly recommend in tourism to read. It's Amelia Moore's book, Destination Anthropocene. And she also takes this a little bit of another approach. This big criticism of the Anthropocene is that it is not geological. We cannot really, and they actually prove that we are not actually going to see any kind of thing. But it's not point. The point is sociological. It is an idea, and it's also material effect. We can see it every time. We can see it everywhere. We are changing the planet. It is not also climate change. We can change it all the time. And but also how we make our way of living in this world of changing climate and this kind of way. But the third thing I also want to take up here, so it's not only that it's global, but it's also physical. But the third scale is where it's the scale. So it's a little bit contradictory to the Anthropocene in the big kind of thoughts, but rather is the scale. And a book from Anat Singh, The Mushroom in the End of the World, she really says it is time to turn attention to the non-scalable, not only as an object for description, but also in sentiment to theory. What she means is that there are things that are not scaled. We cannot scale up into this kind of, we cannot scale up the environment because the environmental effects, they are actually here and now. They are not in another part of the world. They always begin physical at this moment here and now. It's not begin over there, or it's not begin all over the globe. There are small localities where the climate change and the effects begins. So these three things I think we should take care of. And therefore I propose talking about two different things when we're talking about impact. We're talking about the environmental impact, the big global idea of impact, and we're talking about the physical impact on nature. Sorry. Talking about physical impact on nature, which is the hard core fact that we actually can see and measure, see with our eyes. We don't have to have with a car, we need to measure somehow the CO2 coming out. But here we can actually see the changes that we do. And this, I don't think it need to be, in this study, what I'm going to talk about is the physical, as we're going to see here, the hardcore, but it can also be anything with plastic, but also what we don't see animals or something like that. So it can be many other things. So that's about impact. Then we're going to come into events, more tourism, and then events. And here comes a little bit, try to make it very short and brief here of what tourism events is. And we can have many things here, but I tend to take here a very anthropological and sociological kind of idea of it. There is a face-to-face encounter with others, involving local culture, rights, traditions, built on occasional participatory engagement. I think that is quite, we can extend that to online meetings and online events and so on, but I think there is a purpose of the face-to-face. There is this kind of online event that you're doing things in the same time. I'm not super sure that those things are events. But another thing also I think is very important with events is the breaking up from day-to-day life and habits, both place and space, offering new experience and ideas shared with others. And here comes tourism in, breaking up day-to-day habits and place and space. So it's not only a different space that you usually are, but also a different mentality that you have, how you're creating the space, and experience with others. That is also very important, I think. Without experience with others, you don't have an event. An event could be two persons, yes, but mostly we don't need to talk about exact limits. Limited in space and time, that is the usual definition, and I hold also strong to that. It is a specific time and it's a specific space that is taken care of, happening, and it's a single organizer that is responsible, and that comes here very important later. It's always one organizer, so events are normally, when we're talking about tourism events, they are normally not unplanned. And I have here taken up a table, which I think is very useful thinking about the events I'm going to speak about. So we have tourism in one part, in the top part, and then the lower part we have events. And so there is some kind of a scale where we can see where tourism happens and events happens. And events can be with local people, but it can also be not with local people. And I think the further up you come on this, the further up in tourism you are, the more tourism it becomes and less of event it becomes, the more less local it also becomes. Yeah, the more connected or used or even created for local people. When you come in her, the less it becomes, the further up you come, and the more you become when you go lower down. And tend to be also, that is not always true, but tend to be mega events on the top or large scale events when it comes into tourism, and small scale events on the bottom. Normally you cannot have a mega event with only local people. That's usually I never heard of, but somebody can maybe say. But I don't say that is extremely true. But those events that we're going to speak about are somewhere along this kind of scale, somewhere in the middle, where is tourism, more tourism than event, but also more event for local people than for tourists, and the various degrees they are interacting with each other. And we're also going to speak about nature-based events. And so this is from my thesis, and I say that a nature-based event is any temporary gathering that incorporate nature, focusing on open air and non-urban environment experience that utilize and augment nature as a resource to create an imaginative and immersive experience for participants within and beyond the event itself. So it's a lot to take in here. We can focusing on that. I wanted to be inclusive of the events here, of types of event. It can be anything from sports event. I'm going to focus on sports event here mostly, but it can also be bird watching together with others. There is a lot of kind of research on that. It can be walking events exist also, a lot of things. It usually should not be urban, so it's when it should be open air, it's an experience. But it's not only that the specific space in it, but also the specific place. The idea of nature is also very important, but it's also used as a resource. Nature is a resource, as an a resource and as a real resource as well. And this is also distinction become very important later. And it's also that the beyond event itself, that the experience beyond the event itself is also that you're thinking at the nature is important for motivation, but also after when you're coming back home, that nature is so ingrained in this kind of experience that why you're coming there. And many of these participants, as I'm going to talk about, talking about this kind of experience of nature, almost like a godlike creature that just they adore so much. We're going to talk about impact here more physically, and there is a lot to say about this. Is enormous amount of research has been done on physical impact on nature, especially on trails, but also on animal life and so on. And I'm usually going to take physical trails here, and trails and erosion and so on. And these images are from the Andes, just to have some change of scenery. There is a lot of problems with having a lot of people in nature, enormous amount of problems. And it's very hard to exactly pinpoint exactly what it is and exactly how many people. There is a tons of research try to do that, but it's never really never put exact numbers to it. It has only done that for what can I say, for leisure purposes, non-event purposes. So yeah, trail walking and some running, but never in event when you come these masses of of people at the same time, several thousands of people. When I did my PhD, I pretty much tried to scan through internet of research have done on physical impact on nature, on trails specifically from events, and I've only found one real peer-reviewed study on that, and that was from Hong Kong. And even there have around 5,000 participants, and they even said that they should immediately stop having these kind of events. And this is subtropical climate. When we come up, we're going to talk about that later. But the normal thing is that normally problems are informal trails, meaning that they are trails that not are constructed or used in a specific way. Widening of the trails, that is also very important. That also, when you going off course, you also scare animals to be on that place, and that's on the long term changing the ecosystem. And can also the trails, walking on trails and widening and so on, change the water flows, which makes erosions, which changing the landscape. And we have something that calls the cumulative effect. That is the long-term effects that coming from many people walking and changing the climate, changing areas for leisure purposes. And that is not only from tourism, but that is also from all the other activities that is in this area. So we should not say that hiking areas are only for tourists. They are also for forestry, they're also for farming, they're also for many other things. People's daily life, going back and forth in certain parts of the world, going back and forth to school or work or something like that, is also very important to acknowledge. So it's not only tourism that makes those kind of things, or events for that matter. We're going to come up to Swedish nature and Swedish inland nature, and right now I'm in Hokkaido. For those who are in Hokkaido, can really maybe see a little bit of how it looks like. It's quite similar nature, especially up in the mountains. So we are really far north here. This is just close to the Arctic Circle, is a little bit south, nonetheless. And there is very little study has done on this kind of things. But my supervisor, this is in Swedish, have done very nicely have done a summary of all the impact that can happen in these kind of things. And here we have more or less just a small thing here, what's going on. Recreation activity infrastructure leads to changes, habitat change, that animals, they walking away from trails when you have a lot of people. And that in long term, because animals, they are biting off nature. And so, so they, and when they are scared away, they will also not maintaining this kind of climate or nature ecosystem as it should be. Drain the areas. And this I can say here that when you have a trail, I have to look in my camera, but when you have a trail like this, and when you're walking, and when you do an impact along the middle, you will funnel the water coming down from so it's the slope of the mountain going downwards. And when you have a trail, it's going to instead funnel into a specific area and make a specific I can say a waterfall or something, that everything goes to one area instead of going to the whole area. So the whole slope downwards going to dry out, and that's going to eventually lead to resources. Also in this area, it's cold. So the area that this can be 9 months of under 0 degrees. So the regrowth is really slow. We need to think about how slow that is. Of course, it grows much in the summer, because when you're that high far north on Earth, there is also long time sun over the summer month, but also very little in the winter period. And so, but here is crowberry. There's a very small kind of berry, a crowberry vegetation. And when you have when you don't have anyone, the trail can exist for over 50 years afterwards. You can see that trails still exist. So this is how long time. Reindeers is a very important. I'm not going to talk about the Sami. The Sami is an indigenous population of northern Sweden, Finland, Norway, and Russia, and they use reindeers a lot in their economy and also part of their a core part of their culture. And when having a lot of people walking there, they will also avoid these kind of things, and they maintain this kind of landscape. They are very important for the landscape to be there. Yeah, it was also, we can come to that later, but when we have one footstep can take 10 years to recover to its state how it was before outside the trail. This is how long time we have, time scales when we have about our impacts. So we're going to come into the case and explain more about the case here. To understand Sweden, and it also exists, of course, in the other Scandinavian and Nordic countries, North European countries. We have two things that we need to think about. We have the culture of friluftsliv. So friluftsliv we can translate roughly to outdoor activity or outdoor life. It means open air life or something like that. And it's a very, very common part in Sweden that people do some kind of outdoor activities after work, every day, or on weekends, but also doing campings in forests. So it's quite, there is open access to nature. Anyone can trample outside nature in almost any area. It's actually more restriction in private areas, actually. That's part of the constitution in Sweden. But also even nature reserves are more restricted in this kind of sense. But we also have the last years are kind of sportification. And this is the only time I'm going to talk about sports now, but it's quite important that all these activities, walking in nature and so on, that has been in Sweden, sportification means that something that wasn't considered a sport now becomes one. And that means it can be keeping time, record time, and keeping distance, pulses, and so on. It becomes more of measure what you're doing. Instead of just doing it, you're measuring how much and how long and how wide and how much, and so on. And that is a trend that's happened not only in Nordic countries, but also in many parts of the world, that many people are going to run. And they're doing it for health purposes. So that's why more people are going to run in nature, and that happens. So we have come to Jämtland, and we have in the far corner here, we have the Nordic countries where Sweden is in the middle. Jämtland is this white in the small map, the white area, and it's the inland region. Doesn't look like that, but it's actually the middle part of Sweden. So Östersund, which is in the middle of the map, is the largest city in this area, and it's almost as much far north as it is far south. So it's, but it's still considered to be part of the north. And it's quite lonely, the city. So Östersund, it's 60,000 people around, and it's 12 hours to nearby cities north. There are some villages, but 12 hours to a real city up north, and 6 hours south, and 3 hours to the coast, where is also a city. And there is a lot of small villages around. I'm going to concentrate on this area with the red circle, where is the ski resort called Åre. And there is also a village, and the village where lives around 300 people. There is a lot of summer house, and even less, I would say. It will 200 people maybe. And there is a lot of summer houses. And there is barren mountains. When you're going up, the tree stops growing. and you have the Barren Mountains. This is also one of the oldest mountain chains in the world, existed long before the dinosaurs, so they are quite flat. They are not pointy at all. So when the older they are, the flatter mountains are normally. So this is the landscape. So it's the mountainous area of Sweden, still in the middle, but yeah, still in the north for skis and so on. And as I said before, under 0 degrees, around 9 months a year or more. Here we have, it's a little bit dated, but it actually haven't done some research on how much people. We can also see the steep increase that has come. This is in Swedish, and then it's a picture, so I'm sorry about that. But it's you can see the years, and you can also see the green is the bicyclists, and walkers and runners are the light blue ones, and then you have the total numbers. You can see that, and from July to October, that is the walking year. That's when it's not snow, or normally at least. And it's just increased, and they increased far much more after 2017. Yeah, just a guesstimation here because it hasn't been released any numbers after this. This is the consequences, what could happen with nature when it comes to much tourist. Here we have this turquoise lake. It's a bog. No, it's not a bog. It has another name. It is a lake that doesn't have any kind of water. Cannot how do you say? It can only evaporate. There's no rivers to it from it. It's just is there, and so it's a lot of limestone, which makes it having this color. And it became popular from Instagram. It's also how Instagram can change from tourism. The Instagram that actually, when the first ice comes, it's the first ice is completely transparent, and you can go with ice skates on top of it on this kind of blue lake. But after some years, you can see how much nature has. It's actually opposite direction from where this photo is taken. So here you can see that how just a few years it has. And the color of the lake actually begins to disappear because the sediments growing inside. This kind of natural wonder begins to disappear. And there is a lot of, also in Swedish here, but it's a lot of news that came out. So when I begin to do my research, this was all this kind of news. It was also trash. That was the biggest thing in the beginning, trash on trails. But that was actually resolved. It's actually quite interesting. If you just take away the trash bags along the trail, people won't throw trash anymore. People will just take it with them when they're coming back. So it's quite interesting, but it was a lot in media in the time that I started my research, and this was in 2020 and 21. So I can just a brief overview of the studies that I made for my thesis. So there were 4 studies, and there are different kind of characters, and there are both all kind of qualitative research data, all from documents, from a lot of interviews, from participant observation and mapping, and many other things that I did. So it's just a lot of text here, but the first article I actually published was this 600 documents that I got. So we have in Sweden open resource for government documents that is open resource for everyone. And I analyzed all this. It took a heck of a long time to do, but the outcome was basically that, yeah, for events, especially then, the government only require the organizers pick up some trash. That's good, but have a very economic driven incentive to have those events, and actually overruled all the leisure part, non-event, non-sports events. That didn't have so much economic impact. Very interesting. Also, of course, recommend to read. Here is another one that I did in the same time, local actors. Instead of the government, I took local actors, this 300 permanent residents, and a lot of secondary home, which I talked about. And the result here, I show how they sacrifice nature to having tourism and having those events. And I couldn't see anyone who didn't accept it. And I tried to understand this acceptance, what makes that acceptance. That started my whole thesis, actually, what makes us accept. It's hard to visualize future of events, more events. So we will always have more events, but we will always have what we have. But when we're thinking about one more event, people just, are you crazy? More events? No, we cannot have it. But then how are you going to stop it? I don't know, they say. So they're little hard to really think about what they're doing. And the last study I did was from orienteering event. So orienteering is this, sorry, I need to just drink. Sorry, I talked too much in climate.
It's all right.
Thank you. Well, 1,500 participants going orienteering is this event where you have a map and compass, and you are running out in wild nature outside here. And this study is going to be soon published in Tourism Recreation Research, which I'm super happy to have gone through. And I'm not going to speak more about that. Soon it's coming out in these days. It's going to publish. And this one we're going to talk about now, 1,500 people running in the competitors that are running out in nature. And how do these participants see their own contribution to make impact? And this is the study now. Just a little bit overview of them, so you can see all this kind of qualitative research that I did for this. And if you get this PowerPoint presentation, you can go and see them there. And I also make some shameless promotion for my thesis, acceptance of local environmental impact from event tourism, which I am super proud of, and I would more people to read it, and thinking more about impact and more about what acceptance means and why we're accepting things. And I'm just giving one thing here that gives that, but I put all these pieces together there. So highly recommend, of course. So we're going to the study, so the specific study of participants that go into and how this do. So I basically have two events that I focused on. And it's what's called Fjällmarathon, mountain marathon, you can call it. And then Fjällturen, which is mountain marathon, sorry, it's running events. And Fjällturen is a MTB, mountain bike event that goes more or less, but two different parts, but more or less in the same type of climate. You can see here the course. Fjällmarathon, the running event on the left side, they are running different courses over the summer, but mainly they run the 45-kilometer one is the most important and one of the biggest running events, or how to say, outdoor running events that we have in Sweden, and at least one considered to be one of the more challenging one. They also have the longest one running course to have is 100 kilometers. As strange enough to say here, but I'm not a runner myself, so I really don't understand how they can run so long. And we also have the mountain bike event, which is also going up in the mountains, up and down the course of from the road and into the road and so on. And I'm going to speak about these kind of people which I interviewed simultaneously, so I don't distinguish them at all here. So they have really similar traits among themselves. So I'm taking a little bit here in before, how do event participants relate to and accept the physical impact on nature. So that's part of the thesis that I have, the thesis question. Sorry, I'm gonna drink. And how do they adhere to limits? So how do they limit their kind of impacts, and how do they see their own responsibility to limit the impact? So this is the 3 questions I have. And I had 50 online semi-structured interviews. So I have actually several attempts here to make it. And this was very challenging to do. Because my first idea was that these participants, they would be taking photos themselves. So I took from another study that have done similarly, but for leisure, normal runners and so on. But I wanted to do it in an event, and what impact are they actually seeing? So that was my first attempt. But then I went to social media and I asked them, and nobody returned with any events. I was very dubious already before, so I actually recruited on site as well, first time, and that absolutely didn't work. I asked them to take photos, but none of them, no one literally took photos of impact. And that was, so already there, I could see there was something wrong because I saw the impact myself. So instead, for the next round, I took on-site recruitments for interviews instead. So I asked them, you can take photos if you want, but you don't have to. And then we're gonna do an interview. And I showed them 10 photos later over. And I did this very intensely. I did this for 1 week. My goal was to do the most 1 week after the event, maximum 1.5 weeks after the event. So they're not gonna be forgetting too much about the event, especially immediately after. And I did this in 3 times. So it was 50 interviews in total from this. So 15 of those was bikers and the rest was runners from the, yeah. And this is just some few images that I show. So it's a little bit different, but they have similar themes among those. So I talked about how do you feel? So the first photo here, feelings, how do you feel about the event? And then I talked about how the photo was difficult, how could they navigate through the event? And here the middle part, you see choice there. What would you do when you're running these kind of things? And I asked about if they saw any animals and so on, and tried to see if they could reflect anything of a scared animal. If they saw reindeers, which is very, how do you say, an attraction for going into nature. You see the reindeers there, especially when you see a white one, which is actually on the picture. So I've seen a white reindeer. And also the last one is experience, and how did they experience this kind of places and so on, because there was certain places where people stopped and took photos and so on. So that was well, some of the 10 pictures. I just have some of them here. And we're coming into theory, and I think this is important to take it here. I'm not going to do a very big fuss about this, but I need to make the little bit clear here. So I took a degrowth, and I wanted to use degrowth in a very particular way, because degrowth is this theory which has been speaking about economically, mostly, that how we're going to reduce our how do we reduce our impact, and that economy, so Meadows and Gang had been doing this study 72 to see that that economy is separated from natural resources. So the economy grows more than what resources we take out, and that cannot be, of course, good. And also Ivan Illich, in the same time, famous Austrian philosopher, we can call him, saw also that humanity live in abundance, but we never see the crisis coming, and to live in what he conviviality, we cannot we need to see something else. So there is also not only an economic rationale between the degrowth, and degrowth means that we cannot grow so much more, but we need to live with the resource that we have. And that was Kallis said, that we have limits. We seems to live in an unlimited kind of environment and life and economy, but there is limits. And actually, we just have enough resources for everyone actually anyway, as we have right now. It's just evenly distributed. But what I want to capture here is that there is kind of an idea of how we live, a culture of growth that we live inside us in every day, that we cannot take us away from. And we can see that in events all the time. My colleague, Lucina Margayan, she have done this, she looked at books, event literature, publications, and how they express themselves when they're talking about resources. And they always have this idea that events are in an empty space, that you should just imagine an empty space and you can create whatever you want within that empty space. But it's not. Especially when you are in nature, there are resources that is there. There is live things that is there. So we are not unrestricted. We have those kind of environment, and that's actually mind-boggling when you're thinking about all the kind of impact. There must be some kind of limitations that we have. This is just not unlimited. And we can see Freya Higgins de Bjerg, she has this also fantastic study on events, how that events seems to separate time and space from local communities. That is just completely two different kind of worlds, that just the event is there. It really embody these kind of events. And another, the Olympics, Rio 2026, there is a bunch of study, I haven't mentioned them here, but there's a bunch of study showing that they just have this kind of resources of all the events, and they try to use these kind of resources, and it actually became worse. They were promised so many things in Rio 2026, and it just became worse. They didn't clean all the waters. Well, they built a subway, but that's about it. But it didn't help in the environment, as they actually said. And we can also see participants, they also seems to not be able to see the limits of how much they need to limit themselves when they are participating. So this is kind of exist all the time. We cannot limit ourselves in those kind of events. And so we're going to come to the findings. And so we have there are three findings here, which we're going to talk about. And the first thing here is what I would call regrowth. So what does it mean? It means that most of these participants that came here to these events, they really thought that nature will regrow when they will be gone. So all the impact that they made will eventually just regrow. They didn't think about the space so much. They talking about their own kind of environments and so on. And here we talk about two different things. So that all the impact that is made by human body, it seems very natural. It's a kind of everything that has to do with kind of physical impact on nature, scaring animals, and this is irregardless from profession skills and whatever they were, and a dedication level, that how much they would do. They will everyone thinks the same, that their body wouldn't create impact because their body is natural, and so when they are in the environment and what they do is natural. And here is just some quote. I mean, the next rainfall will wash away these tracks. I don't think it will cause any permanent damage to nature, even though it might look a bit sad. And then I would rather do this thing so that it becomes more natural. I want it to be as natural as possible. and this is how it is. So impact is a part of a natural thing, that we are part of nature and we can make impact and just make more impact because it's just so natural. And we can see here it's a little bit unrepresentative from what we have, but this was one of the first pictures. And this is a one-off trail that has come over many years of worn out from, and you can see all the roots and so on. And that might not harm too much, but it's what we could call a heavy use. So nature exists in a degrowth perspective, then that nature exists in abundance, and there's always also compared to the landscape. I didn't take anything here, but we always compare it to the landscape. Yeah, but we're looking at the landscape. There's just so little that is here. This here compared to the landscape, there's nothing. But then when we're talking about what I call man-made impact, that humanity in this kind of what we produce, then it becomes impact, like trash, wind turbines that we can see, pollution, all these kind of things. They are disturbing and they are ugly and they are all these kind of things. And it's really sad. It is really bad. We're talking about this image, really bad. If you drop your stuff, pick it up, a person said. But when I go by a car to the mountains, maybe it's not specifically this, but it also takes motorway to, but I also take the motorway to work. Yeah, so there is a kind of an excuse, you can take it, but they know that this is kind of impact. So man-made impact, suddenly you cannot, they kind of not related to the landscape anymore, and they related to something else, something bigger, and something that cannot regrow. So suddenly we don't live in an abundance anymore. So there are two very contradicting ways of how to see the impact. And next finding I'm going to talk about is the encountering of limits. What does it mean? So here we have a degrowth perspective again, and living with limits. And when do we actually see the limits of our action? And I have three here I'm going to talk about. So lived encounter of limits. So this limits is what you actually saw when you were at the place. And it's also a discrepancy of what I show as images to them instead of what they thought about. So not particularly noticeable, so they don't think that it's noticeable from the event, and not compared to other races. So there's not much more. Even though it rarely becomes as obvious as this, it is still grow big and powerful enough. It makes me aware. It's interesting. It's an eye-opener. So suddenly when they see those kind of impact from afar, when they're sitting in another space from their daily, when sitting in the daily routine online, because they're not at the event anymore, they see something else, and when I show them the photos, they can see something else. So they really cannot reflect on those kind of things. It is also caused uncertainty by them, and they really begin to be dubious here. Oh, what actually happens here? It's a prompt questions what they actually had been seeing. Yeah, so then the next thing where we have an encounter of limits is the reality, what they actually saw. And here it comes, I normally don't, when you do qualitative research, you normally don't count how many people that do certain kind of things. But I think it's quite important here to talk about this. Because of all the 50 I interviewed, was only 3 people that was really distinct from everyone else. That 3 people that actually said to me, "Oh, this was really bad. It was really bad when we were running, and I wouldn't imagine it. It was like this." And they talked about the event. I'm not going to go into much detail about that, but they talked about the event in a very particular way. They have a very particular way to look at it. They talked about the smell. They looked at the landscape in another way. they saw the mountains. Many of the other people haven't actually seen the mountains at all when they were running. They have just looked down on their feet and on the trail. And 6 others, they have seen the impact but didn't put any emotion to it. So there are a very disconnection between the lived experience here than the reality, what is there. But there's still some kind of noticeable impact. But then when we're talking about growth, so here comes, I think, very interesting part when we encountering limits. It is when we begin to put the event on a timeline and see the event in a much larger kind of context. And when we're asking them about progression here, this year there has been exceptionally large number of people. I never seen so many. The parking space reached its maximum capacity. I would say the increased number of visitors would cause more impact. I forgot that word. So suddenly when you put it in a kind of progression, you begin to see, it will be more impact in the future if it happens like that. Yeah, but it's also about that. But when they begin to reflect, some other people, when you're talking about, so how was it before? It wasn't so much impact. How is it now? I bet it's much more. And how will it be in the future? And then suddenly, what will happen now? I'm not really sure what I should say. And they begin to see the severity of their impact over a longer period of time. And here is the last one that I'm going to talk about, the findings from this study, and is the difficulty for setting self-limits. Here is one of the images which I took, and when you see those kind of images here, you can see that his whole leg is between the soil. And here we just have to say, we can estimation that this takes 50 to 100 years to recover if nobody walks here over that period of time. This is how long time it is. So it's so what should you do when you come into these kind of things? What should you do? Should you stop running? Should you maybe walk? Should you walk another way? What is the choice to do it? It's just hard in this kind of places. There is just hard to avoid it. And then when you come into with this image, it suddenly is like, okay, the focus is safety, and the positive side of people are in nature and getting excited, the opportunity to be in nature. So it's the rationale, try to over rationalize it. So but okay, we can destroy nature only because it is good for other means. But we wouldn't say that for, let's say, global, for taking the car, or when we now in Sweden, for example, is where everyone should take the train to vacation and so on. It's not what we're talking about. But suddenly when it comes this kind of thing, we feel good. So it's an over rationalization, but it's also difficult to avoid any kind of thing. So you just pump it in, just run. But there is also, when we're talking a little bit more about it, it becomes this, they know that it's harmful, but they would comply with the rules if there were any rules. And if they knew any rules, because with the reindeer, so we have, as I said, we have the Sami population, and the Sami population, to have those events, the Sami population requires the event to have signs that to not to sit down when the reindeer comes, although many people didn't do that, but you should sit down, and you should not you should wait the reindeers out, and you should absolutely not ride it, and so on. And they saw those kind of rules, and so they were willing to comply with those rules a bit, at least in theory, not maybe in practice. So there was a willingness to try to learn at least what they could do. But there's also, of course, like any kind of environmental, even from the big and global environmental impact to the physical impact on nature, that there is shift of responsibility. There is also other people that do it. Is the event, is the government. So if the government have made permits on it, because all Swedish people, because I should say most of these people were, all of the participants, all the interviewees were Swedish, and most of the people from there was also Swedish. So they know that it needs some kind of governmental approval. That we just know that as a part of the culture in Sweden. That they knew that it has been accepted by government authorities. And so they thought that, okay, but it has an okay, so I can do this. When government have said, okay, I'm able to do this. So we are soon to the finish here, and soon finish off my time as well. I just want to make some comments on this particular study here. The acceptance of impact comes with a view to consider what is natural, and events are natural. Events are in nature are natural, and so the body is natural, and therefore we can do impact. Everything that comes with the body makes that. That's why we can accept it. It's not only constructed. I would say that it's not only a social constructivism, but it's also a comparative to everything else, to the landscape, to other visitors, to what is measurable, to everything that. And it's been described as such, and so we can do that. But also their motivation of being an event. And I should also emphasize this, and I didn't emphasize this before. These people are highly nature-loving people, that people who are in nature every day and running all the time. So they are in nature, they walk in nature, and they do nature activities, all of them. So they are not just disregarding nature. These are the most nature people that you can meet. But their motivation to be at event and to destruction of destruction of nature can do destruction of nature, and therefore they cannot self-assess themselves, because I would say they are in an economic space. When they are in an event, they're creating an economic space where they are in. And within this kind of space and within the economy, when you bought a ticket, when you have a government approval and all this kind of thing, everything is okay because I paid for it. I will also lastly here make a theoretical contribution, and I would love more people here to use degrowth as a theoretical view on it. It doesn't need to be economic, but how we live our life within this kind of economy, and what we are doing, and how we see limits, and how we relate to limit. And degrowth can be very debunked in so many ways, but I think here it's a very key point. And what is most interesting with degrowth literature is that their obsession with using growth terms. They're talking about economy, they're talking about limits, they're talking about actions, they're talking about all these kind of things. We should invent new words instead to understand what we mean about degrowth. And I think it's really important that we are going somewhere and finding these things. So I urge everyone to try to use it, even though it's a little bit difficult took me a time to really mend it into where I wanted to be. But I really do think that we can see how we live our lives with a degrowth. So I will stop there. And there are a lot of things more to say. Please reach out to me. I have the axel.eriksson at miun.se or gmail.com. I also have a Japanese, I forgot to write it here, but also LinkedIn. Please add me on LinkedIn and please comment a little bit. My name is this LinkedIn, Axel L. Eriksson. So to Axel with 2 L, Eriksson. That's all I wanted to say. I guess I give it to Mo, who shared the session.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's have some question and answer session. Any person want to want to ask a live, please raise up your hand. And thank you for listening. We are a little bit over time, but not too bad. We still can have 10, 15 minutes. Yeah, I think you talk really a lot about the nature. Before we have a question, I will ask, because now we know there's no words for nature geography. Everything is a culture because human activity already changed the nature. Just look at the CO2 in our atmosphere. There's nothing is nature. Everything is a human made. So that's really make me think about how we actually define nature here. So
It is very important, I would say. We all to the Mariana Trench, we have some even there, so the deepest part, and on top of the highest part, and so on.
right. So long sentences ask, thanks for the insight of presentation. But you can leave, no problem if you need to leave. Another thing I'm curious, how you study nature from your context, right? How people define nature, how they love the nature is through culture. How can we adapt this kind of research into different part of nature in the world?
That's a very good question. I'm not super familiar with other parts of. I thought this was, of course, a very highly context because of the specific environment. But I think that it cannot be, let's say, from what I said with the research from Hong Kong, they have limit. They said we should immediately limit to under 500 participants for events even in the subtropical climate. So I think there are plenty of types of study that you have to do. You just have to amend it into certain kind of places. But it's also, of course, what do we want to protect? I would love to see, for example, here in Hokkaido, see what it could be, for example, here with the climate and with those kind of things, because erosion. But maybe in a place where you have more animals, for example, that I look very little on the animal, how they scare and how they scare off. We can also do it in how we can change our behaviors into specific parts that we need to protect. Because we all have protected environments in any kind of country, especially in Japan, I would say.
I see. Thank you. What about Edo? Do you want to answer live? Because you write a really long question. Maybe you can just speak directly.
Yes, that's fine. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for a wonderful presentation. I've been reading your research a bit, like in the last few weeks, and it has helped me a lot with like thinking about my own kind of methodology in my dissertation, like how you use like this photo-elicitation, kind of like and how to possibly use other kinds of audio-visual media and creative collaborations to kind of mitigate this dominant dynamic that the researcher might have. But then I also kind of find it a bit difficult to kind of think about these issues because on one hand, I can gain like some important interpretations from the research participants, but then also kind of I would have to somehow resist the participants' influences as well to kind of ensure critical reflection. Like, for example, in the case of your research, if there are like participants who are not ready at all to acknowledge the kind of impacts that have been caused. So I was wondering kind of when you do your own research, do you find it ethically or otherwise kind of challenging to ask these participants for information about the local impacts in case they might have like some unpleasant realizations? And if you do, how do you deal with such issues? Thank you.
Wonderful question. Thank you. I actually have answered that question. I always ask questions beforehand in a research note, which I actually discussed this. But I can say very shortly here, yes, it can be very. I've been thinking about that. It's very unethical to actually show images on people directly what they don't want to be seen. But as a researcher, you have to also see that some part it's not meant to be seen. And here the participants, they actually, I would say, in a very short manner say it here, they actually was hiding the truth from me, and being a little bit like pushing into that actually reveals a lot of things. But I can be actually very, to the other hand, I can be very critical towards, for example, visual anthropology, that giving cameras to people to show their reality, because how do they know that that is truth? How do, if you give camera to someone, how can you confirm that these kind of images that they say is truth? It's a stage, this is not. How can we even, it's really difficult to do. Of course, you can see other angles, which is not possible to see otherwise, but we cannot know if this is the angle or if it's just what they want us to see. Maybe there are participants that might give you something that you don't want to see, but you cannot really assess the you cannot assess the trust, and you really have to heavily reflect on that. And I think most researchers don't do that. So I think it goes both ways. But I think in very short terms, showing images is one way to do it. And even though the participants, they actually agreed to do the interview a little bit, and I only be very open with them that you're going to talk about impact, and you're going to show them a little bit, and also have this ability for them to withdraw any moment, and they actually have an opt-out. And so most people never do. I think no one did that in my case, but I think that mitigates at least one of these kind of dominant narrative from the researcher, as you said.
Thank you very much.
I have thank you, Eto. We have another I will just move you up. Another question is thank you for lecture. Since I'm not very familiar with this field, is that okay? For me to ask questions that might not be closely related to the research, with this term of own limitations. Are there any things that we are not aware but can do to avoid damaging nature?
That is a very good question. I would say walk. When you're coming to the impact, do not, when you come into this kind of impact, walk in the mud where it is, don't spread it out into, don't make it wider, and go slowly on top of it. If you have no other choice, go slowly. I have very problems to do it myself, and my shoes becomes muddy, but it's much better to do that than to do anything else. We follow the restrictions that come. Walk, if it's if there are protection measures that exist there, always use it. They are there for a particular reason. There cannot be any other. People have put a lot of effort taking it up there. Only in this area, it takes to build one. It takes a year to do that. You have to take it up when you have the snowmobile. You have to take it up there. You have to wait for the snow to melt. You have to take up all the tools. You have to do it. You have to take all the trash down again. It takes a lot of time. So they don't do it on a whim. So just do that. But also, walk and use protective measures. That's the best I can give you for now.
Okay, any other questions? I think we're almost on time. If no other questions, we can close tonight's session. I think Axel Sensei need a break. Okay, so let's finish tonight's session. Thank you everybody to coming tonight. I hope you all learned something from Axel's lecture. I will upload this video tomorrow on YouTube. And if you want to check some detailed part or even contact him, you will find his contact information on YouTube channel as well. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, and see you next time.